To begin with, I would want you to please share and elaborate Samhita's initiatives during the COVID pandemic. And to begin with, you can start talking about Revive.
Yeah, thank you, Ruchika, and delighted to be here. I think you've created such a great platform to bring people together and help showcase really the excellent work that started, and that there's a lot that remains to be done. But as at the beginning of the pandemic, we reached out to 33,000 migrants across the country, and just put money into their bank accounts. That's what economists and Nobel laureates were saying as being the need of that moment. As we supported these 33,000 people, and they came from various walks of life, the question that we had for them is, what does recovery, resilience, and growth look like for you, right? And everyone's response was different. Remember, a whole bunch of these people were not exactly the poorest of the poor, but they had climbed out of poverty. They all were hardworking individuals, and a disaster had happened to them, right? And so for them, I think what was important in that moment was dignity, right? They didn't need charity. And so they said, yes, I'm hit hard. I want to come back and just help me get back on my feet. And so Revive was almost set up as a blended finance continuum and a partnership between the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, the Midya Network, USAID, the British High Commission, UNDP, and a large number of partners, a combination of multilaterals, bilaterals, corporates, foundations, social organizations, NBFCs, MFIs, solution providers, all coming together to say, we need to support 200,000 of our workers and micro entrepreneurs who've been impacted by the pandemic. And broadly, we thought that 5 things were important, not just for their recovery, but also for their growth. One was access to finance, and this had to be safe, flexible money that they could use however they wanted to get back on their feet. The second one was access to government schemes, given that the government announced multiple support mechanisms, and we wanted to ensure that anybody eligible for this was getting access to it. The third one was really access to digitization. The one, in some sense, sort of silver lining that came out of COVID was that there was large-scale adoption of digitization, and we wanted to ensure that people had access to the digital tools and resources to really upgrade their skills, upgrade their businesses, and bounce back. The fourth was access to markets, and then the fifth was really access to trade-specific skills. And so collectively, a large variety of people came together to collectively support 200,000 workers and entrepreneurs. The one thing that was obvious last year is that the need was large and growing very rapidly, whereas the resources available to create real change were fairly limited. And so we needed to come up with instruments such as returnable grants, which were innovative but also necessary. So a returnable grant is nothing but a simple, like zero interest, zero collateral kind of loan, not a loan, it's still a grant. There is a moral, not a legal obligation to repay it. It's money given to somebody. They use it to get back on their feet, and they go from being recipients to donors. So when they pay the money back, they're helping another person get back on their feet and recover. So farmers use returnable grants to buy seeds and fertilizers. They paid back when they sold their harvest. We had 100% repayment rate from farmers. Street vendors used it to revive their small businesses, buy fruits, vegetables, begin their cart, begin selling. They paid back in smaller installments. Women entrepreneurs who ran small salons used it to buy products, restart their businesses, offer discounts to consumers, invest in PPE kits, and they paid back once things went back to normal. So it was a safe, flexible instrument being used by different people in different ways to ensure that they're not just able to recover, but they're able to thrive in what we hope is a better normal, not just a new normal for them. The second alliance that we also set up was really to respond to lives of individuals. It's called the India Protectors Alliance. We had Unilever, the Gates Foundation, RBL Bank, 40 different companies coming together to support over 3 million people. And these were primarily healthcare workers, but also sanitation workers and others who, unlike the rest of us, were on the front line every day responding to the crisis. And we wanted to ensure that as they respond to COVID, they were safe, their families were protected, and they had the tools and equipment and the resources to do the best job that they could, because all of us needed them to be safe and functioning at their sort of best capability.
All right. So I wanted to ask you, because of the COVID protocols and all in place, did you have to rethink the execution and implementation policies of your organization, and how did you do? How did you go about that?
So two things were important, right? One is not just to change policies, but just change practices. This was a moment when no one could be on the field. Everyone had to make sure that we are reaching out to people very, very quickly. And so last year, we underwent a digital transformation. Everything was delivered online. Money was put into people's bank accounts because speed was of the essence. Safety was of the essence. And every day that there was a delay meant that somebody was living without money, right? And so we did two things differently. One is, I think we were just tech first and mobile first because we had to be, and all of our partners sort of supported that process. And the second is, most importantly, we had to be partner first. We didn't have the ability to build a large team, find volunteers. We collaborated with anyone and everyone that we could find. Anybody who was close to communities of workers and micro entrepreneurs, we worked with. Everyone from large organizations like Seva, Pratham, and Mandeshi to really tiny ones, right? But they were there where the workers needed them to be there. And so literally it was this partner first mechanism that in some sense transformed our ability to deliver services so quickly and in ways that we were responding to the nuances of what each one needed. And I thought that was such a wonderful thing that came out of COVID, right? The ability to form partnerships, be trust-led as opposed to diligence-led, and be truly collaborative in terms of how we were supporting each other.
So how did you leverage digital communication and all this?
So everything was mobile first, whether it was reaching out to partners, doing diligence on them, whether it was onboarding the workers and entrepreneurs and or healthcare workers that we were supporting. Everyone was really being onboarded and supported digitally wherever it was possible. Of course, when it came to delivery of physical services or creation of infrastructure, that happened with the utmost care. But a lot of our interventions just went online.
All right. Okay. So, what do you think are the key challenges and opportunities in this particular sector of livelihood, in which your organization has won the award?
Yeah, so I think more than the challenges, because, like everyone knows the hardship that everyone went through, let me just talk a little bit about the opportunities, right? The opportunities really were to look at a category of people holistically. To not just think of the here and now, not just think about a relief, but to say, what does it take for that kirana store that delivers our groceries, or that woman street vendor who sells us vegetables and fruits, right? What does it take to truly get them to a better normal? And like I said, there were 5 things. They needed access to money, and the money needed to be safe and flexible and needed to be designed based on their working capital requirements. So all of our instruments are highly flexible, right? They respond to people exactly in terms of how they need the money. The second is digitization was critical. And you know this. Your kirana store who was able to take your order on WhatsApp and accept Google Pay did just fine. Somebody who couldn't do it perished. And so we wanted to make sure that as they come back into the new or the better normal, that they have access to everything that they need to succeed, which was really digitalization, right? The third one was really giving them access to, let's say, government services. What a great opportunity for Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar to come together. So we saw a tremendous effort from the government. We saw corporate India really stepping up to support their workers, their nano entrepreneurs or micro entrepreneurs that are part of large corporate ecosystems. We saw NGOs really stepping up to say, here's a community of people that we have access to. So truly kind of Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar coming together very, very quickly, doing what each one does best, and not just responding in the moment, but saying what is the 1, 2, 3-year trajectory of this entrepreneur, and how can we bring together these 5 catalyzers, right? Access to finance, access to government schemes, access to digitization, access to market linkages and core expertise to try and create that change at scale in a sustainable, holistic manner, and in ways that we're really seeing leverage, small amounts of money creating transformational change. Philanthropy coming in to fix markets, but then handing it back to the corporate sector who really have the scale that one needs to really transform enterprises.
Okay. And what about the challenges?
So look, I think the challenge was very little money, a large number of people that needed to be helped. One can't go onto the field, right? One can't trust the same traditional processes of due diligence and onboarding where it takes 6 months to make decisions. Those things went out of the window, right? And so almost sort of recreating these trust-based partnerships that we can collectively respond to was both a challenge but an opportunity. And I think that we as a sector, but also as collaborators, I thought we did really, really well given the situation. So I would almost say, so many opportunities coming out of challenges last year.
So that must have seen an influx or an increase in the number of corporate partners. So are there new partners that have joined you?
Absolutely. We saw new funders, new corporate partners, new solution providers. We had never worked with NBFCs and MFIs or unicorns to deliver services. And this year we worked with all of them, right? So truly, a fairly extensive partner base where everyone our own competencies. And what was obvious last year and will remain true going forward is no one institution can solve this problem, right? I mean, the kinds of micro entrepreneurs are very varied, and yet we need to support them at scale. So, Ruchika, just to give you a sense, right, we are running pilots of 75,000 Kirana stores being supported. Why 75,000? Because there are 10 million Kirana stores. And so the pilot itself needed to be designed for scale and sustainability. Only when we can get to 75,000 can we get to the 10 million. So it was, in some sense, the opportunity for people to come together and think scale, think sustainability, think sharing of risks and rewards, and a collective impact from the get-go.
So can you name a few funders who have joined you?
Yeah, so Revive was supported by USAID, the British High Commission, UNDP, the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, the Media Network, Godrej, Arvind, HSBC, RBL Bank, Adidas, like a whole bunch of companies who traditionally may or may not have had the opportunity to work together, but came together in a moment of need, with each one leveraging each other's core competence.
All right. Okay, and because the focus has shifted to COVID-led initiatives, do you think that has impacted or diversified the funds from traditional CSR activities, and how has that impacted the organization's key abilities?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. Things like, let's say, healthcare and livelihoods were extremely important last year, which means that money from things like environment or education or, let's say, women's health was diverted. And so in some sense, this is the challenge for us as a sector this year, right? How do we reinvest in education because you've had children leaving school? So on one hand, you have to bring everyone back to school, whether it's children, parents, teachers, etc., to make up for the gains, to make up for the losses of last year, and then still continue to ensure that you're completing curriculum and meeting all of your outcomes for this year. So you're going to have to see much more effort. I mean, think environment, right? Look at all of the pollution that just masks and disposable gloves, etc., caused last year. I mean, they were important, but one has to now deal with everything that we didn't do last year and earlier this year and do more of it going forward, right? I mean, climate change is real. We will have to reinvest significant amount of resources to think of other problems beyond COVID. So absolutely, right? And again, I think the same collaborative, highly leveraged approach will be critical because the problems have magnified, the resources are limited. And can we build on the partnerships and the trust that we collectively built on last year and use that to our advantage going forward?
Right. So the question was, what is the geographical reach of your projects?
So Ruchika, we are across the country. We needed to be across the country. So while some states like, let's say, Maharashtra were ones where we began work, today we are across multiple states. And we were agnostic. We said we went wherever there was need.
All right. Okay, so the CSR has fundamentally changed after the CSR was made mandatory by the Companies Act 2013. What are your thoughts on the CSR laws in India? How credible has it become now?
Look, I think, while there was, I guess, resistance when the CSR regulation was first introduced, today, companies completely comply with the regulation, right? So in some sense, that's been a good thing. And the fact that the government has kept the focus on ensuring that that companies are encouraged to actually meet their CSR obligations is definitely a good thing. I think the question really is, how do you frame the regulation in a way that companies are not just writing checks, but are truly contributing to the growth of India, right? Because they have access to expertise and networks that are tremendous. Today, companies solve some of the most complex problems in the world. And so how can we truly leverage not just their CSR resources, but their expertise to try and solve problems in ways that, they're uniquely positioned to, right? So I would love to see regulation allowing companies to use their competencies to solve all of the challenges we face, right? We have levels of extreme poverty, hunger, women's empowerment. We've had sort of women step out of the workforce. We need to bring them back in. And so I would love to see a regulation that actually encourages a lot more proactive and, more importantly, strategic participation from the corporate sector into the development conversation that's important for all of us, right? Companies only do well when the rest of the country does well. And so it's in everyone's interest to try and figure out ways to work together.
I want to know that on the other hand, the FCRA was passed, the bill was passed in 2020. So how far do you think this is a viable and a feasible and a logical thing to do administratively and financially for the NGOs and implementation agencies?
Look, it has been very difficult for NGOs, right? Because the sector has been reliant on foreign funding. Also, we find that foreign funders are more evolved and have been funding, let's say, institutional capacity building or things like research and knowledge, which are critical for the development of any sector. So the fact that this money is not as easily available right now and that there are restrictions even in terms of their use means that you've added to the burden of nonprofits, right? Like last year, as it is, NGOs had to drop whatever they were doing to respond to communities in need. We saw education NGOs providing food relief because that's what needed to be done. So expectations from NGOs increased manifold. Then obviously there wasn't enough money, right? In any case, most of the money was redirected to COVID relief. When FCRA money got cut and more restrictions were imposed, now the question is, how do you expect this sector to do its job when your need has magnified, the resources are limited, restrictions are imposed, what you can and cannot do has changed literally overnight. And so unless we learn to trust each other and create regulation that enables each one to do our jobs to the best of our ability, we're going to continue to see strife, right? Rohini Nilekani talks about this Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar. And all three have to come and work in close coordination with each other, with trust, and use our capabilities. And so in some sense, you need a regulation that allows us really to work in that paradigm. And so I wish, I guess, that we see regulation that enables the coming together of Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar.
So you would definitely like to see a change in the policies.
Sure.
Okay, now as corporates are contributing to the PM Care Fund also, what are your expectations from corporates on their CSR fund allocation to different thematic areas in today's changing scenario?
Yeah, so I guess the following requests, right? That at a time of a national crisis, everyone needs to do their best in terms of helping people, of course. But that doesn't mean that resources should be taken away from other critical things. I mean, education remains important, women's empowerment remains important. environment remains important, right? And so I think the request is that while you allocate funding to national emergencies, disasters, let that not take away from resources that you've pre-committed. There was a reason why you committed certain resources. There was a reason that you partnered with certain NGOs. Treat them like your partners, right? Don't treat them like vendors. They are reliant on you. And let's ensure that those budgets remain there because communities need those resources. So really to take like a portfolio approach and say, yes, let's do more, but let's not take away from what is also essential, because it's important for us to grow as a country.
Right. So where do you see Samhita 10 years down the line? What are the objectives? What is the agenda?
I think what's clear in the last 1 year is that we will co-create new alliances. And for us, I think collaboration is the only way to move forward. And it's something that we talked about for a long time, but it's something that became a reality last year because of the need. We were all collectively responding, right? And I am so energized by the kind of collaborations, the speed, the focus on the beneficiary, right? Last year, logos and egos didn't matter. We were all doing it because we had people to impact. And I think we will continue to stay committed to the goal of collaboration for a better normal. I don't think we are okay with a new normal. A new normal is not good enough, and particularly for people that were impacted disproportionately. So I think we will stay committed to bringing Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar together to collaboratively try and create a much better, a stronger, a more resilient, a more growth-focused India together.
Okay, so Ms. Naik, I have read a few stories where Samhita has helped people, especially the beauty parlor entrepreneurs, and have particularly worked for this gender. So as a woman entrepreneur yourself, what do you think are the challenges to reach out to such women? What are the challenges that you have faced personally? And how do you think you can overcome that being a woman social entrepreneur?
Yeah, so, it's interesting, right? That I think women are shy, right? And I've seen this even for women. I mean, when we offered returnable grants, we saw women saying, don't give me the full amount, give me a little bit of the amount. They're always hesitant, they're cautious, right? And so I think as almost as social sector actors, it's important for us to reach out to women and not just bring them into the program, but invest in their confidence. We've noticed that when you trust a woman, and when she learns to trust herself, she is able to use the resources and tools so phenomenally. We've seen women in the last 1 year who've never transacted digitally, who've never used financial instruments, just overnight take the little support that we offered them and they grabbed onto it, right? Within a few weeks, they were digitally transformed. They were financially, not just literate, but financially empowered. We saw women who paid back 102%. And this was a moral obligation or a legal obligation to pay. We didn't see this amongst men. So when we asked women, why are you paying back 102%? You don't need to pay it back. And they said, no, it's you helped me in my time of need. I want to help another woman exactly like me, right? The pride, the confidence, the assurance, the ability to grab onto any opportunity and surpass her expectation, our expectation from her is something that we saw again and again and again. In the second wave, when we talked to people and we thought people were giving up hope, we saw women fighting and they said, tomorrow will be better. We will make it better.
Providing livelihood opportunities. So can you please continue with that?
Yeah, no, I think just to summarize, right, that we really saw women who received the support do far more with it than we saw men doing with it. And so I think we're very confident that as we begin to focus on women workers and women entrepreneurs, that they will really exceed our and their own ambition in terms of growing their businesses and ensure that we are helping them not just be resilient, but really have a prosperity mindset, right, as they move forward.
Okay. So my final question is that since you have a finance background, what have been your key learnings from your education, and how far have you been able to implement, or how far have they been able to help you in your social entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I'm an accountant. I also studied public policy. I studied economics. So in some sense, I think because the exposure to kind of different subjects, but also I've been a researcher, I've been a consultant, I've been an entrepreneur, I've been an accountant. I think what it exposed me to was the strengths of Samaj Sarkar Bazaar, right? That every industry, every sector, every cause, every institution, every individual has their own strength. The question is, how do you bring each of them together in a way that each one can catalyze a lot more than what they individually bring to the table? And I think that's why Samhita is a small, nimble, innovative organization. And we sit in the middle of those stakeholders. And really, I think our mantra for transformation is, how do you get different actors to do far more collectively than they would do individually? Because, India is a diverse, complicated country. Things are changing very rapidly. And you want to keep people together, but keep them focused on this sort of large impact, right? Because our numbers are large, our impact has to be corresponding, and we have no time to lose. So yeah, I think it's sort of knowing maybe how to bring people together and how to really leverage their core strengths.
All right. All right. Thank you, Ms. Naik. Thank you for that wonderful insight and your valuable time. And we look forward to more such opportunities with you. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ruchika, and thank you for inviting me and for all of the great work that you guys do. So congratulations, good luck, and do more.
Thank you so much.